In the quiet waters of the Sunda Strait between the islands of Java and Sumatra lies a place where nature once unleashed one of the most powerful and cataclysmic forces. The eruption of Krakatoa not only obliterated most of the island itself, but also triggered a series of tsunamis, killing over 36,000 people and sending shockwaves around the globe. The aftermath of the explosion was felt far and wide. The global climate was altered and the skies were painted with vivid, fiery hues, inspiring terror, artistry, and existentialism around the world. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Geography Girl, and let's dive into this episode. The Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia is located on the subduction zone of the Indo-Australian and Eurasian plates. In 1883, it entered a phase of continuous eruptions from June, and by the end of August, the eruption entered a phase of maximum activity. The 27th of August ended in a catastrophic culmination where there was 4 major explosions. An account of the Los Angeles Herald 2 weeks after the event recorded that the volcano of Krakatoa vomited forth an ink-black cloud which spread over the clear tropical sky with inconceivable blackness, involving the land in complete darkness. The pyroclastic flows that travelled over the surface of the water at around 300 kilometres an hour killed about 1,000 people in Ketimbang on the Sumatra coast, about 40 kilometres north of Krakatoa. More deadly were the tsunamis that reached as far as the coast, South Asia, East Africa and Western Australia. Particularly hard hit were the islands of Java and Sumatra, where cities such as Serang were completely submerged. A total of 36,000 people were killed. The sound of the 1883 eruption was the loudest ever recorded and was heard around 1/3 of the planet. In Mauritius, which is 48,000 kilometres away, locals heard what sounded like distant gunfire. It is thought that the explosion of Krakatoa was so powerful that it tilted the world ever so slightly on its axis. The magnitude was such that the warming of the ocean and the rise in the sea level in the 20th century was substantially delayed by the ocean cooling effect resulting from this eruption. The local population was sadly very underprepared to manage the situation. Many locals thought of the volcanic activity as an omen from the spirit of the mountain that was unhappy. In the months leading up to the explosion, tourists did sail over to take a closer look. However, it wasn't considered dangerous because Krakatoa was misinterpreted as 3 separate volcanoes, where it was actually 3 cones that shared the same magma chamber. The lava and gases were ejected from both the Perbutan cone and the Danan cone to approximately a 50-kilometre height in the air. The magma chamber emptied itself very quickly and collapsed, such that only half of the Rakata cone remained. Krakatoa is a stratovolcano. This is a steep conical built by thousands of years of eruption, creating hardened composite layers of lava and rock. These hard layers of rock trapped volatile gases in the underlying magma, and the magma chamber itself emptied very quickly and then collapsed. The explosion captivated the imagination of people around the world. It was one of the first natural disasters to be reported on in real time, thanks to submarine telegraph lines that had just been placed between Batavia, which is now Jakarta, and London. It set the standard for modern coverage of disaster news. Reuters, which had just been established in Batavia, was able to telegraph the tale of events via the submarine telegraph lines. Obviously, the local impact was absolutely devastating. All vegetation on the islands was stripped bare, and the homes and structures were completely demolished, with thousands of people in Java and Sumatra just pushed out to sea. The child of Krakatoa is unfortunately not just a story of mythology. It is a cone that has risen from the centre of the caldera in 1883. An eruption of this volcano on December the 22nd, 2018, caused deadly tsunamis with waves over 260 feet in height measured nearby on the islands that formerly made up the large single volcano island of Krakatoa. At least 437 people died and over 30,000 were injured, with over 30,000 being displaced. The eruption of the child of Krakatoa is one of the deadliest volcanic eruption events of the 21st century so far. Not only are the local impacts immense and devastating, but the sheer global reach of this eruption is an important story too. Throughout the world, there were spectacular sunsets and sunrises with vivid colours. The fine volcanic ash and the aerosols ejected into the stratosphere caused vivid and colourful sunsets and sunrises across Europe and America. Striking atmospheric displays persisted for several years, with the most dramatic effects occurring in the months immediately following the eruption. There were reports of unusual optical phenomena, including blue and green suns due to the scattering of light by the volcanic particles. The Krakatoa twilight glow is an afterglow effect in the evening sky, which was widely observed and documented. Why was the impact so global and so vast? The volcanoes in the Arc of Sunda have large climatic effects. This is because these are volcanoes that are in a subduction zone, which tend to be very explosive and are rich in sulfur, meaning gases can reach the stratosphere and react to become sulfuric aerosols. In the case of Krakatoa, the sulfuric cloud was distributed amongst both hemispheres within weeks and took up to 3 years to disperse. The subduction zone aspect is important, but being tropically located is also important. The eruption caused a temporary global cooling effect. The average global temperatures of the world dropped by around 1.2% in the year following the eruption. This chilling effect is due to the aerosols in the stratosphere absorbing the radiation, which creates a differential heating between the sunlit tropical stratosphere and the polar stratosphere during winter. The altered temperature gradient strengthens the polar vortex and created a downward propagation. It is believed that this strengthened circulation of air over the North Atlantic and led to cold winters in Europe, and severely disrupted weather conditions which affected agriculture and daily life. The impact of the Krakatoa volcano eruption was that it spurred significant scientific interest and research into the effects of volcanic eruptions on climate and weather. Scientific interest in meteorology and volcanology in Europe and America extensively grew, and data analysis of these events developed significantly. Volcanic forcing is now considered to be a main factor in explaining climate variability over periods and decades where there were climatic crisis, famine, socio-economic unrest during the last 25 centuries. The socio-economic impact of the volcanic activity is a field of research that is incredibly interesting. The Huayna eruption in Peru in 1600 led to catastrophic frosts in North China. The Tambora eruption in 1815 has been linked to cold periods in the Iberian Peninsula, Europe and America, and is linked to the emergence of pandemics on a global scale. Although obviously there were obvious and immediate impacts on the local community, with the destruction of homes and economic activities. In his book Krakatoa, The Year the World Exploded, author Winchester describes how after the eruption there was spawned a rising of anti-Dutch settlement. It was essentially the beginning of the end of Dutch rule, with the killing of 24 Dutch colonial workers and the beginning of what is now the most populous Islamic state on the earth. Prior, Indonesia had been a predominantly Hindu country. The Muslim missionaries were very fiery young men, Winchester says. They told the Javanese, who were clearly in the mood to believe it, that Krakatoa's explosion was a sign from God that he was furious with them for allowing themselves to be ruled by white, Western, Dutch, infidel colonials. The mullahs from Arabia advised the Javans to rise up and kill them. However, not everyone is on board with Winchester's theory of how Indonesia historically embraced Islam, particularly Muslims who contend that theirs is a faith of personal independence, peace, and non-evangelicalism. The increase in food prices and the strain of resources is thought to have aggravated colonial rivalries. In Europe, the agricultural disruption led to social and economic instability and social unrest, which eventually reached its boiling point with the outbreak of World War I. This event spooked and inspired people worldwide. There was a distinct psychological impact where humanity got a sense of its own vulnerability and the unpredictability of the world, which influenced public and political attitudes. There was a huge impact on art and literature. Edvard Munch, the famously morose artist behind The Scream, which features an infernal sky which is thought to have been inspired by the Krakatoa aftermath. He wrote that the sun set all at once, the sky became blood red. Clouds like blood and tongues of fire hung above the blue-black fjord and the city of Christiania. I felt a great unending scream piercing through nature. The English painter William Ashcroft was commissioned by the Royal Society of Great Britain to record the effects of a Krakatoa in the skyline over London. He created over 500 paintings, which you can view at the Science Museum. They are absolutely incredible. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. This one is a personal favourite. As a human geographer at heart, I love to learn about how our physical futures influence the way that we live. I hope to catch you next time. Goodbye.